Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Wrestling Discussions, and welcome to today's episode. Now, in today's episode, I'm going to be discussing AEW Dynamite, Impact Wrestling, Friday Night Smackdown, and maybe a little more if I can think of it. So, going into AEW Dynamite, so in yesterday's episode, I said that I was not going to talk about, in terms of predictions and stuff. I wasn't going to build up to AEW Dynamite. I was just going to discuss the results in today's episode, which I'm going to be doing now. So, last night was AEW Dynamite's first Dynamite since 2023, since the new year, and they jam-packed it with a bunch of entertaining matches. They made sure to put in as many prestige and high they could to really get the ratings going and to really kind of just cement everything. One of the matches, I think one of the big matches in my opinion, honestly, in my personal opinion, this was the biggest match in terms of match card. This was the one that was biggest on paper. Ricky Starks versus Chris Jericho. Now, I know some people might disagree with me on this, but personally, I think it was the biggest match on paper. And I say that because, first of all, Ricky Starks is just coming out of his match with MJF, still a few weeks renewed from their championship match, and which was a great match, by the way. I think MJF and Ricky Starks complemented each other greatly in that match. I think Maxwell Jacob Friedman can complement just about anyone, but I think specifically Ricky Starks, I think those two have such a very similar move set and a very similar style, and I think with them both being up-and-coming wrestlers, I think they complemented each other to a whole nother degree of any other wrestler that either of them had faced these past couple of years of AEW. Now, especially going into a match with that of Chris Jericho, I think this was Starks' career in professional wrestling. I think Chris Jericho is one of the best wrestlers in the world, and I think I think almost everyone can think that. I think there is no one better than Chris Jericho in the sense that this is the one guy that is still wrestling, that has the knowledge and experience that he has. And yeah, AEW has guys like Sting, and that's not to discredit Sting. I think Sting is an amazing wrestler, and I think he has a lot more, is because Chris Jericho was not afraid to, not to say Sting was, but Chris Jericho was not afraid to really expand his horizons. Chris went to ECW, he went to WCW, I think at one point, he went to WWE, AEW, I mean, Chris Jericho, Japan, Chris Jericho has wrestled all around the world, and I know Sting has as well, but I mean Chris Jericho has not only wrestled all around the world, he's done matches that are almost all around the world in the sense that he's done types of matches that vary in different regions and different areas, whereas I don't really believe that there is a Sting death match out there, or there is a barbed wire match that Sting participated in. And if there is, I apologize for being wrong. You can fact check me on this, because I could very well potentially be wrong on this. I'm not saying I'm not. I'm just simply saying that in my opinion, Chris Jericho in AEW is you don't usually hear. It's like a once in a lifetime kind of thing. Kind of like Dusty and Cody Rhodes, like how they really had a mind for this business. Chris Jericho really has that. And Chris Jericho is also someone that, the way he came into this business, he was not afraid, in the sense that he was not afraid to say, hey, I'm not feeling this business right now, so I'm going to go and focus on my music career, or I'm going to go and do this. Like, this guy, he is the definition of expanding your own horizons outside of professional wrestling without necessarily having to do what Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson did or what John Cena did and go Hollywood. Because he was able to pursue his passions outside of professional wrestling and still have a career in every aspect of that. Both through his band and through his career as a professional wrestler, he has been able to pursue all of that. And that I think that is great for him. And I think a match of Chris Jericho and Ricky Starks, I think that is great, because I think both wrestlers really can complement each other, especially a guy like Ricky Starks. I think Ricky Starks is one of the most entertaining guys AEW has, from his promos to his in-ring capabilities to his gimmick to everything that he does, his entrance, everything to a T. And honestly, that reminds me of that of Chris Jericho. And, we've seen Ricky Starks, especially these past couple of weeks, he's been compared to guys like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And listen, this is not to discredit Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, but I think Ricky Starks is his own person and is his own form of entertainment that is nowhere near that of, not to say he's better than Dwayne, just to say that it's not near Dwayne in the sense that these guys wrestled and they performed in completely different eras and completely different generations of what is professional wrestling. And so their promo work and their gimmicks and their wrestling styles, they vary and they're completely different. And I think it's safe to say that, yeah, sure, The Rock might have inspired a couple things from Ricky Starks, potentially, but for people to say, oh, you're just a Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson wannabe, or you just steal everything from Dwayne, I don't think that's true for a second. I think when Maxwell Jacob Friedman cut his promo on Ricky Starks and called him a dollar store Dwayne, I don't think that's true for a second. I think Ricky Starks is his own wrestler, and I think he can go out there every single night and prove himself every single night because he is that great of a wrestler. And I think, just like, for example, I think the same could be said about MJF. Because I'm sure people compare MJF not necessarily because he's maybe as great of a wrestler as them, but because maybe his promo talent and his ability of kayfabe. Because, I've heard people say this before. When you would watch Ric Flair, right? When you would watch him on TV, and then say you saw him at the supermarket or something the next day, what you saw on TV is the same guy you would see in real life. He didn't change it up. It wasn't an act for him, he kept the character alive. It was real for him. And I think the same thing can be said about MJF. When you watch podcasts, does he tone it down a little bit? Yeah, and I think in this day and age of professional wrestling, I think you almost have to tone it down a little bit due to stuff like cancel culture and stuff. I think there has to be that fine line at this day and age, which sucks, but it's an unfortunate truth that I think professional wrestling has, avoided at a cost, and I think MJF does a great line with that, does a great job with that fine line, in the sense that he can still cut amazing promo live while also evolving and keeping to himself and keeping both his character and his real life self alive in a way. And I think that's very important. I think that is very, very important to have and to look at. And I think, again, same thing with what I said about Ricky. I think MJF cannot be compared to guys like Ric Flair, Gorgeous, or Gino. Not that he's not on their level, because personally I think MJF is one of the best wrestlers in the world, and I think personally compare him to guys like Ric Flair, Gorgeous, or Gino. I don't think it's fair to say that anyone in this era right now can be compared to anyone from how many eras ago, because I think it is a completely different style, and it is a completely different business almost. It's a completely different environment from what it was how many years ago when Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was wrestling, or when Ric Flair was wrestling, or when Gorgeous Georgino was wrestling. Everything changes, everything evolves, everything adapts, and these wrestlers are simply adapting to what was. I think that's exactly what Ricky and MJF do. And I think Ricky vs. Chris, honestly, I think it's, like I said, I think it's the best match on paper, because I think they just match up so well with their personas and their storylines currently. Like, I don't think you could have a better version of Chris right now fighting Ricky, just due to the simple fact that it fits so well to have this Chris Jericho Appreciation Society, this flamboyant, I'm not a professional wrestler, I am a sports entertainer, Chris Jericho, fighting a flamboyant but also brave and calculating and determined Ricky Starks. I think it's one of the best storylines and this is an underdog Ricky Starks, right? This is the up-and-coming Ricky Starks. This isn't like Chris Jericho versus Bryan Danielson or Chris Jericho versus Jon Moxley. This is a guy that his name has really only come up from that of AEW, and that's why this is really important to look at and focus on. What's even more important is at AEW on Dynamite, Ricky Starks picked up the victory over Chris Jericho. Afterwards, the Chris Jericho Appreciation Society did attack him, and this is when Action Andretti came out. And Action Andretti, again, I don't know how to feel about this guy. Like, I really don't. I don't know how to feel about him at all. Because Action Andretti has something in the sense of Chris, you know guys like Chris Jericho and whatnot and Tony Khan have to see something in him, first of all, for him to have his first television appearance fighting Chris Jericho and beating Chris Jericho. And this guy, like, everyone was chanting for him, and they weren't even calling him Action Andretti. They were literally chanting, "Let's go, jobber." Like, they were calling him a jobber on live television, and he won. And so I don't know how to feel about this guy. But nonetheless, he came out, he tried to defend Ricky Starks, he brought a steel chair, and I think he did fairly well until Ty Mello and Anna Jay went low. And honestly, I kind of like that idea, though. I think Anna Jay and Ty Mello really getting involved with not just the women's division, but even the men's division in terms of standing up for the male group, the male members of the Chris Jericho Appreciation Society. I think that's really important because it reminds me of groups and factions of D-Generation X and any group that had a woman in it or whatever in professional wrestling, any faction that had that, because when you look at it, it just brings you back to like the days of WCW or old WWF, the Attitude Era, where if there was if you had a faction and there was a woman in the faction that like would cheat or stand up and perform low blows to guys when the ref wasn't looking, that was the vintage days, and that's what I think stuff like this can bring you back to. And so I'm all for stuff like that. Now, also going into this idea of Hangman Adam Page versus Jon Moxley, I think this is one of the hottest things on AEW, and I say that because I think I think that Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega is the 2022 going into 2023 version of the 2019 Kenny Omega versus Jon Moxley. And I say that because Hangman Adam Page has truly developed and evolved into that of almost what Kenny Omega was to AEW in 2019. And I could be wrong, but in my opinion, that's how I see him. And it just screams like Kenny Omega versus Jon Moxley to me. And so I love this idea of Hangman versus Mox. And I even more so love this idea of Hangman not being cleared. Hangman even said last night, "I am still not officially cleared." And he said, "I cannot get into a fight with Mox tonight. I can't fight Moxley because what Hangman wants to do is he wants to go into this match next week, and he's hoping for a good MRI, a good brain scan. He's hoping for the doctor to clear him, and he wants to fight Mox next week on Dynamite." And personally, I want to see it. I just hope this isn't the end of it. I want to see these two go at it in some really extreme rules, big stipulation type match. Like, I want that to be the end of this rivalry. I don't want to see this end with what we're currently seeing. And I'm sure it won't, but I just want to see more of this. Like, I hope this doesn't end here next Wednesday. Now, going into what else we saw with here, let me pull it up on my phone. I didn't watch Dynamite last night, but I did get most of the results already, so let me see here what we've got. Okay, here we go. So, Jay Lethal and Jeff Jarrett versus the Acclaimed for the AEW World Tag Team Championships. So, I'm going to give my thoughts and opinions on this real quick. Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal as a tag team, is interesting to me. So we all know Jay Lethal from TNA, from back in the day, and from Ring of Honor. Jay Lethal, one of the best professional wrestlers in the world, has certainly has nothing left to prove, in my opinion. And same with Jeff Jarrett. I mean, and this is another thing of like with Chris Jericho and Sting. Jeff Jarrett's knowledge and his experience is just huge, and we saw him. I think the last time I saw him outside of AEW was WWE SummerSlam of 2022, but we also saw him, and this is what I was more so referring to. I forget how long ago it was. It might have been early 2022. We saw him, I believe it was the Crockett Cup. I believe that's what it was called, the Crockett Cup or something, for NWA, where he was the special guest referee for the Matt Cardona versus if I can remember his name. I don't remember his name right now, but for the Matt Cardona NWA World Title match, was it Nick Atlas? Is that Nick Aldis? I think it might be Nick Aldis. For the NWA World Championship, he was the special guest referee for that match, and I think I think Jeff Jarrett, like, even as a special guest referee, I think his experience and his knowledge of the business is just so important to any aspect he's thrown into. And for him to be teaming with Jay Lethal, who is a guy that Jay Lethal has worked with very many veterans of this sport. I mean, we've seen the incredible things he's done with Ric Flair down in TNA, and we've seen the things he's done as Macho Man, like, as his Black Machismo. And so I think it's safe to say for sure that him and Jeff Jarrett make a very dangerous team, right? And for them to fight for the AEW World Tag Team Championship so early on, I think that is very important, because they really haven't been a tag team that long since coming to AEW together. Well, not together, but since teaming up in AEW, they haven't been a team that long. And the Acclaimed have been a team for a while. The Acclaimed have been a great team in the sense that their in-ring chemistry and their unified wrestling capabilities always seem to come in clutch. And on top of that, they have another veteran of this sport, another knowledgeable wrestler of this sport, Billy Gunn. And I think 100%, I think that is very important to have in this business, is a mentor of that capacity, a mentor with that knowledge. And I think that I think that either way, that match is going to be a gold mine. And from what I'm seeing here, Jay Lethal and Jeff Jarrett supposedly originally won by pinfall because it looked like Anthony Bowens got his foot on the rope, but unfortunately Sanjay Dutt, who I think Sanjay Dutt's hilarious, and I think his promo work is great. I think he is so entertaining. I love Sanjay Dutt. Pushed Bowens' foot off the rope before the ref saw, and then they after looking back, the referees changed it. They changed their call, and they decided to restart the match, kind of, and the Acclaimed won via pinfall. Now, they did win via a roll-up, and so this could certainly lead to more matches between the two, for like a rematch for the AEW World Tag Titles. And I think, now personally, do I want to see Jay Lethal and Jeff Jarrett as AEW World Tag Team Champions? Personally, I'm going to say no. I think the upcoming team that I want to see beat the Acclaimed for the AEW World Tag Team titles are definitely FTR. I think FTR is a great team. I want to see a lot more out of FTR, and I would love to see FTR actually come up with the victory. I'd also like to see a potential Lucha Bros versus the Acclaimed, or I mean, even Top Flight. I would love to see Top Flight beat the Acclaimed. I think Top Flight right now is doing very well for themselves, especially after the Ring of Honor 0 Hour. I think it was Ring of Honor Final Battle, which was a month or two ago on 0 Hour. I think their 0 Hour match with the OGK, with the Kingdom, Matt Taven and Mike Bennett, I think it was an incredible tag match, and I think Top Flight is incredible, 100%. And so I'd love to see them be the next AEW World Tag Team Champions. Now, we did hear from Dr. Britt Baker, and it seems to me like Britt Baker and Jamie Hayter are so far on a potential same page here. Now, I'm not so sure about that because, again, I had said this in a previous episode. I really want to see Britt Baker and Jamie Hayter kind of go their separate ways. I want to see Jamie Hayter become a singles wrestler and kind of, shift away from this, whatever this is with her and Britt. And I'm sure eventually that's the goal. But as of right now, it looks like they're still a unit, which, hopefully down the line they will start to switch things up and change things up. We also heard from Jungle Boy. Next week, he and Hook will, I guess, be working together. Now, I also talked about this before on a previous episode. I think it was episode 2. I am not a big fan right now of this Jungle Boy and Hook working together business, but I also think Hook can benefit very well from this, but I also feel like this is a bit of a step back for that of Jungle Boy. But again, I could be wrong. We're just gonna have to wait and see how they do this and how they perform this storyline for the next couple of weeks. Now, obviously going into the Bryan Danielson versus Tony Nese match, Bryan Danielson did pick up the win, which no surprise there, obviously. Now, MJF did come out, and this is where I'm going to kind of give my commentary. MJF versus Bryan Danielson, I also believe I had said this before, I do not really want to see MJF versus Bryan Danielson this early on, because I feel like, honestly, I don't want to see MJF versus Bryan Danielson at all if it's for the championship. I want to see it not be for the championship. And I say that because this would be Bryan Danielson's 4th match, I think, for the AEW World Championship. And, that's gotta suck, right? Like, why would you have Bryan Danielson lose 4 times in a row? But at the same time, MJF comes out week after week, and he keeps saying, my reign of terror is only just beginning. And it really is. He really only won the title back in November. And so to take it from him right now, especially when he's done the things he's done with that belt, I think it would be a crime, honestly. Like, I think it would be a crime in the professional wrestling world. I think MJF is very vital right now to this business with that belt around his waist. I think he is very important, and I think it is very important for him to have that belt. And so going into this, if they make this a match, they have to do it somehow where MJF either has help or he has some really underhanded tactics, because they cannot have Bryan Danielson win, but they also, in my personal opinion, they can't put MJF over too much, because this is still the American Dragon. This is still the guy that is now fighting for the AEW World Championship 4 times. And so they gotta put Danielson over while also making MJF retain the title. And so they gotta do it right, in my opinion. That's all I'm gonna say. They gotta do it right. That's where I stand on this. Now, looking at what we're seeing here with AR Fox versus Swerve Strickland. Now, I am not the biggest fan of Swerve Strickland. However, I think he has certainly been proving himself a little bit on AEW lately. Personally, I think he did a better job in WWE than he's doing right now over in AEW. And not to say he's doing terrible work. It's more so just to say I don't think Tony Khan is booking him properly right now. Now, he did get a victory. I believe it was a pinfall over AR Fox, and which I think is great. I think it's an interesting team for sure. Like, I think it's an interesting storyline right now with what we witnessed what we witnessed Strickland and his group do to Keith Lee. And so I think that's certainly interesting. But here we also saw, with it on Dynamite, moving right along, we also saw Jade Cargill and Red Velvet versus Kiera Hogan and Sky Blue. Now, Jade Cargill essentially fired Kiera Hogan. And again, I think that I haven't said this yet, but I'm going to say this now. Jade Cargill is... She's a great wrestler, but she is not getting booked as such. She's getting booked as someone who is simply there to do measly performances, few-minute matches, and honestly just destroy her competition. And it's not to say that it's not to say that, she doesn't deserve to destroy her competition. It's more so to say that if you want to prove yourself as the best wrestler, right, you don't wrestle all these new women wrestlers coming in, or all these nobodies. You take it to the cream of the crop, like she did when she first won the title. She took it to Anna Jay, and she took it to Ruby Soho, and she took it to Nyla Rose, and now she's like taking how many steps back? She needs to go on a forefront right now, and she needs to start fighting wrestlers like Britt Baker, and wrestlers like Chris Statlander, and wrestlers like that. And I think if anyone's going to take the TBS Women's Championship from Jade Cargill, I think it should 100% be Chris Statlander. I think Chris Statlander with the TBS Women's Championship would be a great way to... I think it would be a great match, one, for her and Jade to finally meet up and face off, and two, I think it would be amazing to see Chris kind of pave a way with the TBS Women's Championship. Because right now, first of all, Jade Cargill's undefeated. And second of all, there has never been a second TBS Women's Champion. She has been champion for over a year now. Or about to be for over a year soon. It's about to be a year. And it feels like it's been longer than that, to be quite honest with you. Now, obviously, like I said, she's been undefeated, so I think you guys can guess, yes, her and Red Velvet defeated Kiera Hogan, and that doesn't surprise me, Kiera Hogan and Sky Blue, especially considering that Sky Blue is very new, right? Sky Blue is very new in terms of professional wrestling, and honestly, she's been getting these more and more live matches, but I don't think she really... Honestly, I don't think she can win them right now, in my personal opinion. Like, she's not there yet. And I'm just going to say that now. I don't think she's there yet for that caliber of a match. Like, to really win. Like, I think she's entertaining, but I also think she needs more dark matches. She needs more matches on Escalation before she can really mess with the big girls, right? And as for Kiera Hogan, I think Kiera Hogan was much more utilized on Impact Wrestling, because I just feel as though Kiera Hogan is not being treated the way she should. I think people are really overlooking her, but honestly, I think Kiera Hogan is a great athlete, and I think she's an underdog. And I would love to see her do a little more with Jade Cargill, but I also I don't see her being able to really perform to that extent, though, either, so... I guess we'll just kind of have to wait and see in a way, like we'll have to see where it takes us, I suppose. Okay, so last match of AEW Dynamite. I know this video is very long. I apologize for that, but I just have a lot I wanted to talk about involving AEW Dynamite. And I'm going to get right into this last match. Samoa Joe versus Darby Allin. Now, Samoa Joe has been TNT champion for a little over a month, maybe 2 months, a little less than 2 months maybe. And he is also the Ring of Honor TV champ. Now, he's been the Ring of Honor TV champ for quite a while. And he lost his TNT title last night to Darby Allin. Now, Darby Allin is now a 2-time TNT champion. I'm not against the idea of him losing to Darby, but I also think that, I don't know, I think Joe should have held the titles a little longer, especially after such a win against Wardlow of all people. It's like, why would you have him beat Wardlow, humiliate Wardlow in such an impressive match and fashion, and then have him lose to Darby the next week? It's something that, and I think this is something that AEW is having issues with. They are struggling in the sense that they have all of these wrestlers. And that's the issue, right? Because when you have such a big roster, you don't know what to do with everybody. And I think, honestly, I think they were just like, we need to start filling in more wrestlers and we need to start filling in more people. And I guess they, in their minds, they thought, let's make Darby TNT champion again and bring back the, like, you know, the once per week TNT open challenges, and you'd see a wrestler from Dark, or you'd see you know what I mean? And it's not that I'm against that, it's that I think this story specifically, I think it deserved a more proper build-up than just, oh, Wardlow lost to Samoa Joe, Darby Allin came out to defend him, or to attack Samoa Joe, and then the following week, Darby not only gets a match against Samoa Joe, but he beats Samoa Joe for the TNT title. It just feels rushed, is what I'm trying to say. Alright, so unfortunately we are a little bit short on time, so I'm going to quickly go over the Friday Night Smackdown tomorrow night, and then I am not going to talk about Impact tonight. I will discuss that tomorrow with the results. Again, I am very sorry for any confusion, but unfortunately I'm just kind of running low on time. So going into tomorrow night, or going into Friday night, we will see Drew McIntyre and Sheamus fight the Usos for the SmackDown Tag Team Championships. We will also see Braun Strowman fight Gunther for the Intercontinental Championship. So that's two major title matches. And I'm sorry, I said the SmackDown Tag Team Championships. I meant to say the undisputed WWE Tag Team Championships, seen as it is both titles currently. So first, I'm going to talk about the Braun Strowman-Gunther match. Now, I mentioned this before, I believe, on this podcast. I personally would have rather seen this match happen on pay-per-view. And I also feel as though this match, Braun Strowman should win. Now, for this match, for Gunther to lose this match on television, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying they need to do it right. They need to really think it over if he's going to lose. There could also very well be potential of Gunther winning. I don't know. Now, as for Braun Strowman, if Strowman were to win this, and I said this before, it's going to be interesting. Because I'm not sure who would be much of a competition to him in terms of the Intercontinental Championship. So it's something they would have to work out, right? It's something Triple H is really going to have to mull over in his head. And so it's just something that they're going to have to make sure, like, are we doing this right? Is things going, like, you know what I mean? It's something they're really going to have to closely look at. Same can be said with this Drew McIntyre Sheamus versus the Usos match. Because Drew McIntyre and Sheamus already have a victory over the Usos once, right? And on top of that, Drew McIntyre and Sheamus, they're a team that it's like, if they lose to the Usos, why? Because they are just so prestige. Like, their wrestling and their capabilities, and they are like a brotherhood, right? Like, they are great friends, they are brothers, they know each other very well, and so it's not like you can say, oh, well, they're not even a team, they don't even have in-ring chemistry. They do have in-ring chemistry. We've seen their in-ring chemistry, and that's why I think this is so important to look at and really think, okay, this match has to be done correctly, because you don't necessarily want the Usos to lose, right? Because it's most likely not their time yet. But you also don't want Sheamus and Drew to go out there and lose any of their prestige, because they are two of the biggest wrestlers on SmackDown right now outside of the Tribal Chief Roman Reigns. And so it's something that WWE is going to have to closely look at. Alright, so ladies and gentlemen, I am looking at my time, and I do have a little bit of time left to discuss a little bit of Impact. I was only going to discuss one topic of Impact anyways, and then tomorrow I will actually discuss the results in tomorrow's episode. So going into Impact, we've been seeing a lot of Tommy Dreamer and Bully Ray and Josh Alexander, stuff like that, and Hard to Kill is coming up. I believe it will be next Friday, I think, and that's going to be interesting. I think right now with what we're seeing, I think Bully Ray is 100% in the head of Josh Alexander, and I think Bully Ray is one of the, and I've been saying this a lot tonight, but I think Bully Ray is one of the best professional wrestlers in the world. I think his version of entertainment is taken to such an extreme, to such a hardcore level, that it is so hard to look at that and go, that is not real. That, it's so hard to look at that. It's so hard to look at a wrestler like Bully Ray, look him in the eyes and say, you're a gimmick. You're a character, because honestly, I don't know if he is a character. I could very well walk down the street right past him and think to myself, that dude is 100% everything he is on TV. You never know. Wrestlers are really good at hiding that. And so it just depends. And I think his segment with Tommy Dreamer, not 2 weeks ago, but 3 weeks ago, their promo segment, I think that shit was great. I loved that promo. I loved that segment because Bully Ray and Tommy Dreamer are two of the smartest men in this business, and I say that because look at where they came up from. They came up from ECW, which is one of the most hardcore wrestling promotions in the world, and you can't look at that any other way than, how we looked at it. When you come up in a wrestling promotion such as that, you come up in a way that professional wrestling, like the reality of professional wrestling and the lessons of professional wrestling are just all brought on you straight away. And I feel like anyone that wrestled in ECW immediately just had this wiseness and this all around great mind of professional wrestling, because everything they did had to be so methodical and it had to be so theoretical, that just to the point where it would actually work. And so I think those two in anything is great. And I think adding Josh Alexander, the world's champion, to fight Bully Ray, and then having Tommy Dreamer in the mix, I think that makes this segment so much better, because it almost reminds me of Sami Callihan versus Eddie Edwards, or Brian Cage and Sami Callihan at some point. It just reminds me of all of that, and I think it's great. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to close out today's episode. Once again, thank you for tuning in. This is the longest episode we've done so far on this podcast. I apologize if it's too long for you. I'll take, comment down below if it was too long, too short. I take all that into consideration. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.